Comes down coming up on 140 on this Friday edition of Chicago Live. One of our top stories this week on Fox32Chicago.com has been the discovery of nearly 100 different cars right in the heart of the Chicago River. We're joined now by the executive director of Friends of the Chicago River, Margaret Frisbee. Thanks so much for your time.
Brian, thanks for having us today.
So, Margaret, what was your first reaction when you read or you first heard this story of nearly 100 cars being found right in the Chicago River?
Well, I'll be honest, Brian, it's a symbol of how people used to view the Chicago River. It really used to be a dumping ground, and we're just grateful that today people don't think of the river that way anymore.
And when it comes to these 100 cars, and you mentioned that in the past it was kind of looked at as more of a dumping ground, what else do you think could be down there?
Well, I can tell you there's a lot of fish. There's turtles, there's muskrats, there's beavers, but we do still find litter. And, the litter has really changed over the years. We've been working with Loyola University of Chicago and doing research on the litter in the river. And obviously, there are things at the bottom that's part of this legacy of the old river when it was much more industrialized and it was fenced off and polluted, and people thought of it as a dumping ground. Today's litter, although by bulk, obviously, those cars take up a lot of space. What's coming into the river mostly is actually plastics. What we found from our research is 85% of what is in the river that's floating that people find is plastic, and of that 85% is food foam. So we know people throw occasional things in. There's reports of divvy bikes, there's reports of the Lime scooters, but mostly it's windblown garbage that should end up in garbage cans.
Yeah, we know that there's definitely a lot of wind, especially if you're walking across some of those bridges with the
That's
Chicago
right.
River right there below you. For people at home who maybe aren't familiar with the Friends of the Chicago River, what exactly does your organization stand for? And what do you guys have to do with the future of the Chicago River?
So, Friends of the Chicago River was founded in 1979 to protect and restore the Chicago and Calumet rivers. And really, what we stand for is a clean, healthy river that's equally accessible to everybody, that it's alive with wildlife, there's people on the water, in the water, next to the water, and that all of us get to enjoy it equally. It's a tool in a sustainable city, and it's an important economic driver. And we welcome anybody who wants to work with us to help our bright future of the river as a blue-green corridor.
Now, we had this story earlier this week of those cars being found in the river, which I think kind of leads to the question, just how deep is the river?
Well, that's a great question, and it really depends on where you are. So the river has a lot of different services it provides to people. So if you're a fish, it's your home. If you're a barge, it's actually an economic waterway that allows you to transport goods. So in the navigation parts of the river, it could be as deep as 20 feet, so that navigation can occur. And then the upper North Branch, the Little Calumet, the wild parts of the river are a lot shallower. Some places it's 2 to 3 feet, or even 4 to 5. But it's really different, kind of depending on where you are.
Now, we know that we'll see sometimes some boats in the river kind of doing tours. Of course, the architecture tour is very, very famous here. Some people kayaking. What do you view as the future of the river maybe 10, 15 years down the line? What do you hope that we're seeing here in Chicago that we're not currently seeing today?
Well, I think what we're going to see is more of what we're seeing on September 21st this year, which is the first Chicago River Swim. So, an organization called Along Swim is hosting this event, and it's going to be literally 500 swimmers from all over the world downtown, and Friends of the Chicago River supporting it. And that's what our vision is for the future: is that the people are in the water, they're recreating, that it's part of everyone's community, and that it's not fenced off and it's not polluted, which it really isn't very much anymore. It's just a place of magic, and that the river can play a great role in building public health and wellness, and providing a hot spot for wildlife. And we want a visible, a beautiful blue-green corridor of connected open space for people and for wildlife and resiliency.
Hey, Margaret, you mentioned that wildlife. What kind of wildlife are you hoping that is attracted to the river, whether it's birds, whether it's different species of fish, now that it's a lot cleaner than it used to be?
Well, Brian, we already know that the species of fish have gone up from about 7 to 10 in the 1970s to nearly 80 today, and we're seeing more native fish and greater abundance of fish. But we're also seeing the return of more sensitive creatures like river otters. And so what we're hoping for is that we don't see an occasional river otter, but that's something that people get to be familiar with much more regularly.
A lot of people kind of associate the river with right downtown in the heart of the loop. Could you provide some perspective on just how big it is and just how long it kind of strands from where it starts to where it ends? And also, could you share a little bit more information on which areas of the river have truly improved over the last few years? And are there still a couple of problem spots along the route?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And again, people are so familiar with downtown and it's full of kayaks and tour boats and super exciting. But the river is actually 156 miles long, not counting tributary streams. So the Chicago River is part of the Skokie Lagoons. The Brook in Northbrook is the Chicago River system, the Little Calumet River, the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, which in fact we're working to redefine, and people can take a survey at chicagoriver.org to weigh in on a new name for the canal. We hope to get rid of the word sanitary. And it's really, it flows through forest preserves and parks and suburbs in Chicago. And there's so many ways people can use the river. There's canoeing, there's kayaks, there's the Chicago River Walk, there's the African American Heritage Water Trail, and just a ton of things to do. That, the river's much cleaner. There's water quality standards that protect for swimming. And as I said, we're going to see people swimming in just a couple weeks. But we still have issues with, runoff pollution. So when it rains, everything on the road can end up in the river, and that's water pollution. Sometimes there's still combined sewer overflows, which is very uncommon these days, but sometimes sewage does end up in the river. And then climate change is making it rain harder, and that is washing rain, road salt, garbage into the river. And so we're really concentrating on a few things. One is working to install nature-based solutions, places where the actual rainfall would just get absorbed in the ground the way that it used to before we really developed the whole region with towns and roads and sidewalks and buildings. And so the more that rain can go into the ground like it's supposed to, that means it stays out of our storm sewers, it stays out of our combined sewers, and it stops rushing pollution off the roads into the river. That's a real big one. And we're also working on a litter-free Chicago Calumet River that ties, of course, to the topic that we started with. And we're working with volunteers and policymakers to literally improve the river physically, and then also develop methods, through public policy where we can reduce the waste stream so litter doesn't end up in the river.
Margaret, have you partnered or maybe kind of looked at other cities and kind of what they've done to kind of redevelop their rivers and how it can kind of be an economic driver? As I know you said that you guys partner with Loyola for, I guess, some of the testing and quality of the water, but have you maybe had some conversations with other groups like yourselves in other cities where they're also trying to improve the river conditions there?
Yes, absolutely. This is a worldwide effort. People are recognizing that rivers are places that need to be restored. It's one of the tools in our arsenal against climate change, is opening up our rivers for recreation. A lot of European cities in Australia, New York City, have really embraced their rivers for swimming, and Friends of the Chicago River is part of the International Swimmable Cities movement. And next week in Australia, our policy director is attending an international river symposium in Brisbane. And we're in fact a finalist for the Tees International River Prize, which is for river resiliency and management. And all the organizations coming together at this conference next week are looking at what is the role of river for human health, for environmental health, and for economic health. And in Chicago, when you look at these beautiful buildings, you look at new developments, all the wonderful parks that have been developed, the investments the forest preserves are making, you can see that people recognize that the Chicago and Calumet River is a place that should belong to everybody, and that it needs to be something that we think about when we talk to our elected officials and the policies that they make.
Now, I know we got this event coming up later on this month where people will actually be swimming in the Chicago River. Outside of that, any future events?
Yeah, you can join Friends of the Chicago River almost every weekend for paddling events, for community cleanups. We have an autumn boat cruise October 2nd where people can come out with our experts and learn about the river and have a festive beverage and something tasty to eat. And we just ask people to come to our website, chicagoriver.org, and join us as a friend, join us as a member, join us at our events, and really help be ambassadors for this wonderful river that has improved so much but still needs our help.
Margaret Frisbie, the Executive Director of Friends of the Chicago River. Thanks so much for your time this Friday afternoon.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.